Hey guys, Sleepy Reader here. I've been looking through a bunch of the comics, or most of the comics I got, sort of pouring through, flipping through. Read one or two stories with my daughter. Why do I do that? That's weird. Um, read through, looked through a lot of them and was looking at letter columns a lot. So I kind of was going to show you a few things or read you a few things I found in some of the letter columns of these Bronze and a few Silver Age comics that I bought at the comic swap yesterday. And in the spirit of that, I wanted to shout out some of my commenters. What really keeps me going is the comments I get on these videos, and I have some great people commenting, and I wanted to give an incomplete list of some of the great commenters that I've had recently. If I were to go further back, people kind of ebb and flow in how often they comment on my videos and probably how often they watch my videos. So this is a snapshot of some of the recent people. Some of these people, though, are really awesome, and so I wanted to start with ones who not only comment a lot, but I learn a lot from their comments, particularly. These people get an extra bonus star for helping me with my comic knowledge. 64-page special. I guess he is just a great commenter all around, but I learn a lot from him. He has a great sense of humor, and at the same time, and he can be sarcastic and snarky, but he always feels very honest at the same time, and that's true of his videos too. Some of these commenters make videos that I know of, others don't, or I don't know about their videos yet. Jared Osborne always has some more information for me, plus just does interesting comments and does interesting videos. I always watch his his weekly haul videos, and anytime he's reviewing, analyzing some art in an old comic or whatever, I love that stuff. Can't get enough of it. Recently, I've had a lot of comments from someone whose name is Special Person, and he or she or it gives me a lot of great info along with some interesting comments, info, on comic book lore and stuff. And then the king of obscure comic lore that I do not know, and I learn from him so much, and his comments are wonderful, is Russ Works. And I'm pretty sure Russ has yet to make any videos, but he has so much a backlog of knowledge that goes way back into the depths of comic book history. At least he often, I suppose we always have the illusion of someone else having a huge amount of knowledge as we hear what knowledge they have. We don't know the gaps in their knowledge. But anyway, Russ Works, amazing stuff. I learn about new artists. I learn about factoids of history and titles and everything. Another great and voluminous lately commenter is Max Washington Songs. And I do watch his videos. He does not make comic book videos, but ever since I discovered him through my comments, I love his music. He puts out a wide variety of his own music and musical covers that he puts up on YouTube that are really great. And his comments are always so enthusiastic and bubbling over with comic book thoughts. I love them. Edward296, I've often shouted him out, and he continues to give me great comments, and he does great videos, and often can fill in a little bit of gap in my knowledge about something or other. Let me know what's what. And recently I've had some comments from Crude Quotient number 1, or Crude Quotient 1. Don't know much about this person. Fairly new to commenting on my videos as far as I know, but a lot of good information in the comments I've seen so far. Another person who's always loaded with good information and is very thoughtful, a deep comic book thinker in comments and in his own videos, is Paulo Costa. Most recently, he posted a video about of a Mike Royer interview at a a convention in Portugal. I assume it was in Portugal, where he lives. Then I have a list of other people who are also great commenters. That first list was people who I thought were in particular strong on filling in my knowledge base of comics. But other great commenters who I've had a lot of comments or a good number of comments from lately include Sarge Merica, Mike, who does his own great short Now in the Bathroom, Exiled to the Bathroom videos. Earl Grey, who always does wonderful in-depth looks at the art and story contained usually in beautiful hardback collections. Comic Crack has a great channel. All of you should check him out. He's a frequent commenter of mine, as is Masked Panther. Check out the Masked Panther and see what he's up to. Comic Crypt of Castle Hills gives me some great comments, and hopefully you all know his channel. Wonderful channel. I'm going to get very repetitive. A lot of these people do have their own channels. Don the Doctor is a newer commenter to me, but been getting a lot of comments from him lately, and I really appreciate it. And he has his own cool channel, which I think is a newer channel or new to me. Charlton66, a great collector of my generation, and I always learn a lot from his videos. So much to learn from his videos. I really enjoy them. The deep look into the bronze and silver, particularly I think the Silver Age. The Rick and Dave Comic Book Hour, who also have their own channel called the Rick and Dave Comic Book Hour. I think it's usually Rick leaving the comments. Someone who I don't know if they have their own channel or not. I need to check it out because I've just started getting comments from U2449, YOU2449. And Gambit896 is kind of back in the game lately, and I always love comments from Ben, Gambit896 Ben. And he was one of the very first people to be a regular commenter on this channel 5 years ago, and his support meant a lot to me. And it still does, but it really meant a lot to me when I was starting my channel. Another great newish to me person is Luther Manning. Medium new, I guess, at this point. You can see him a lot on ETA Nick's channel, but he has his own great channel too. He's really strong on the nostalgia side. Again, a guy of my generation, I believe, close enough. And so I love all the stuff, all of his thoughts and all the stuff he has to show and his strategies of collecting and everything. Samuel Trejo, I don't know for sure, but I think he's quite a bit of a younger generation, and leaves lots of great comments and has his own channel where he shows his haul, where he has a wonderfully eclectic and indie skewed mix of things that he reads. Dr. Silver Age, another one of the great sort of nostalgia channels for my generation, or people interested in my generation. He leaves some great comments. And Walt's Comic Book channel leaves some great comments. And Walt has a great channel which is mostly focused on the newer comics, and both mainstream and indie, I'd say. But he clearly loves some of the indie stuff. I think is most inspiring to him. Then we have Gore Vidal, who makes less videos these days, but still a great guy, great comments, an eclectic, goes his own way kind of person on his channel. Oddfellow Thoughts, one of the bedrocks of the community, or bedrocks of reviewing comics on YouTube, in my opinion. And then Liking the Covers, who's fairly new to me, has his own video channel and comments very regularly on my videos. So those are the ones that, in a quick look over the recent comments I've gotten, I said, yeah, they're a regular commenter. You guys rock. I can't believe I just spent 9 minutes just shouting things out. This is going to be a long video, I'm afraid, because reading letters to you is going to be probably a slow process. So there was this guy named T.M. Maple. And if you read the letters pages much in the late 70s and 80s, you probably saw his letters all over the place. And recently I became curious about him, and I looked him up. This is a letter he wrote for an obscure issue of Machine Man. T.M. Maple was a pen name of sorts for a Canadian fellow whose name I now can't remember, something Burke. I just looked him up and read about him on Wikipedia and a few other places. And he may be the greatest writer to letter columns, at least in memory of the comics books community. He wrote over 3,000 published in comic book letters. And he ended up with the name T.M. Maple when some editor shortened some longer pseudonym he was using on his letters. So everybody commenting here and stuff, and actually what we do on YouTube talking about comics is in the spirit, in a sense, of T.M. Maple, just as it's in the spirit of the fanzines. I'll read you some of this letter he wrote to Machine Man. Dear editor, I know that you people are trying to establish Aaron Stack as an outcast from society, but I think you carried that point to ridiculousness in issue 15. Two men trapped within a raging fire, expecting, if they have any brains at all, to die momentarily. Then, miraculously, they see a figure dashing through the building to rescue them. But even before they're free of the burning structure, the men start bad-mouthing Machine Man because of his inhumanness. And it goes on. So every T.M. Maple letter was a very thorough review of the comic. So you got comic book reviews in the comic of previous issues from T.M. Maple, and they were often pretty hard. In fact, I guess he published even more in DC Comics, and I remember a lot of really harsh reviews from him that got published in the letters page. I'm not sure how the letter page editors felt about him, but they published him a lot. So this was a 50-center Machine Man. Here's a 60-center Batman that I found some T.M. Maple in. If I was looking at more comics from the 80s, I think I would just see T.M. Maple in every issue. This one, he starts off, Dear Editor, seeing as how number 339's lead feature was the first part of a multi-parter, which are often hard to comment on since so many start off with a great concept and then run it into the ground, and sometimes the reverse, work out the metaphor for yourself. And since the backup story was so good, I'll concentrate on Robin's adventure this time out. So this guy must have just spent, maybe he was semi-retired or something, or had no family to keep him busy in the evenings. He must have spent a huge amount of time writing letters. And then in this older, unknown, or not that much older, a 40-center, Unknown Soldier, so what year is this from? 1979. I had a suspicion that there was a letter here. It was unsigned from Toronto, Canada, and I don't know if Burke/T.M. Maple was from Toronto. But I started reading this letter, and I thought, that sounds like T.M. Maple, so I wonder. But it starts out, Dear Editor, Unknown Soldier has never been a magazine noted for verisimilitude. But number 229 was especially absurd in this respect. The writer expects us to accept a plot which involves Rommel coming to North Africa before the war and hiding supplies of water, and then, during the war, acting as a disguised secret agent, checking on the water supply's preservation, and then using it in his motorized attack. It's difficult to remember a more ridiculous concept. It boggles the mind. I don't know, that might or might not be T.M. Maple, not even having signed that one, or maybe before he was given the nickname T.M. Maple. So somewhere out there is probably someone who really has huge knowledge of letter writers. So in this Magnus robot fighter from the year 4000 AD, they had, I was surprised, I didn't know Gold Key did letters columns. They had a letter column on the inside cover. And I enjoyed reading all the letters here. A lot of people talking about science fiction, even referencing science fiction writers. One is by Paul Neary from Bournemouth, England. I don't know if that's the Paul Neary who later became a comic book penciler and inker. Still is an inker, I think, but used to do a lot of penciling in British comics once upon a time. Another one is from James Wheelock. I think that Brattleboro, Vermont. I think he might be a science fiction writer now. But the one that caught my most caught my attention was from someone named Jeffrey Stevenson, who lived in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, not far from where I spent some of my childhood. Let's see, the date of this is 1967. In 1967, I guess I was living in Middletown, Connecticut. So Jeffrey writes, "Don't put a girl in The Outsiders. She would soon tag along and cause trouble. The next thing you know, she would get the limelight, and Magnus would be a secondary figure. Probably have to take orders from her. You think it wouldn't happen? Well, I used to love The Fly. Then they put in Fly Girl. She stole the plot. And now what do we have? Girls spoil things." I agree with one of your readers. If you listen to all of us, you'll have a mess. I thought that was funny that he says this after giving advice about don't put a girl in the comic. People who want changes are in the minority. Besides, if they didn't like the comics, they would not buy it. Everything in Magnus is great, but please don't ever put word balloons on the cover. And please, none of those continued stories. So that one really tickled me. Keep girls out of the stories. So speaking of that, here's a Lois Lane. Now I can't even remember for sure. This is interesting. So this issue's letter column, it's issue number 109, are letters responding to the famous Lois Lane, but they didn't know it was the famous Lois Lane issue then, but the now famous or infamous Lois Lane, where she turns herself black for a day to report on life in the ghetto. So all of the letters in here are, in a sense, worth reading to see what people's reaction to that was back then. But here's one. Dear editor, I'm a Negro boy, 15 years old, and I just finished reading Lois Lane 106. I was glad to see you show the world as it truly is, and at the end, as it should be. I do not believe that the whole white race hates the Negro. I have found this out. In the comic, though, I think you could have pointed out that all Negroes don't live in slums. I live in a great-looking neighborhood, and I don't want other people thinking we all share tenements with rats. Other than this, 106 was one of your best. John Goodloe, Jr. from Cincinnati, Ohio. And they wrote back, "Check, John. In the future, you'll see blacks in other environments, too." The next one was from someone named Mrs. D. Cook in Middlefield, Michigan. And she writes, "I've just read of Lois Lane's Race Relations. Sir, I feel more people, white and black, ought to read that book. When I did, I thought it was very good. I myself am only a small part black. No one would believe it by looking at me. There must be many people like me who are torn between two races. They look more like one race than the other. I have been reading Lois Lane ever since I can remember. After this issue, I plan on reading a lot more. Keep up the great work. I plan on keeping this book for my children when they grow up. I hope others enjoyed it as much as I did. Lois's comic has always been great. Now it's the best." And part of what I think is interesting there, and maybe there would have been other people whose lives are affected by their ethnicity who didn't like this comic at the time, or maybe not. Maybe at the time it really did have a strong message, because people now make fun of it and view it as I think people view it as kind of a sort of racist, a white superiority, or what do you call it, white privilege, racist way of approaching racial issues. But in the time, in the context, what people had to read elsewhere, maybe it was a powerful issue. Yeah, I'm going to go on here. Those were the two that really struck me, but I'm going to read more of these. Dear editor, issue 106 was the best I have ever read. That says it all. If one is able to overlook the cliches so common to race plots, the story teaches great beauty. So they recognize that there are cliches in the story, but there's still a powerful message. The blood of one race going to another was too trite, as was the ending of Two Hands Clasped, black and white. But I want to say that what I loved the straight question Lois asked Superman, and her snappy, cool answer to his excuses. I loved the truth conveyed to the slums in the slum scenes. I loved the fact that the black Lois was a female because her relationship with a black man, though she was really white, was advanced and intelligent, and not the old plot of black and white men or black and white women. The entire magazine was a great breakthrough. Like all truly artistic pieces, the people who should read it will not. As a member of a minority myself, being Jewish, I must say you all should be proud of yourselves. Dear editor, I regret to say that I Am Curious Black was not a classic, the best story I've read in any comic. Those things are in quotes, they must have been on the cover. Or anything of the sort. But it was a good story, and the best one to appear in Lois Lane since number 91. What distinguished this story favorably from the dozens of others that have appeared about racism in recent months was its exploration of racism among blacks as well as among whites. I have to read this issue. I've never actually read it. I've seen the cover in a million different places where they talk about the history of Silver Age comics. Or was it bronze? No, I think it was still silver. The idea of Lois trying a black like me masquerade was good, and I liked the link to issue 90. The only thing I missed was the traditional "the end" in the last panel. Was it left out because you were afraid of destroying its symbolism? If so, I see your point, but most fans are so used to it that they wouldn't even think of it that way. Oh, this is interesting. From a totally different note, she goes on to say, Werner Roth and Vince Colletta did well with the art. While Colletta can be a positive detriment to some artists, like Gil Kane, whatever a positive detriment means, he works well with Roth. I just thought that was interesting to see that comment. But I'd like to see a few more artists try their hand before you make a permanent choice. So that one was from a man, I think. So we had two from women, apparently grown women, one from the boy who was 15, and then one from a man named Richard H. Morrissey. At least I assume he was a man. He could have been a boy, I suppose. Anyway, the level of discussion in the letters page of a Silver Age comic, it's pretty interesting, especially a DC comic that were not known much for their letters pages. I have another issue of Lois Lane. In fact, this is number 90. Did they say there was a tie back between the Curious Black one and number 90? I'm not sure. Was it 90 or 91? And here I thought there was... So in this one, slightly earlier than that one, this one slightly earlier, they do this odd thing of kind of, I think, combining several letters and answering them in parentheses in the middle of the paragraph. So that's kind of odd and hard to read. So they chop up the letters and put them in categories. So they have a section called Our Marriage Counselors. Am I wrong in presuming that Superman's secret identity is still a secret? Well, why can't Lois become Mrs. Clark Kent? No one would know that she was Mrs. Superman, and there would be no danger in being the wife of an apparently normal man. I'm getting pretty doggone tired of Lois wanting to marry Superman when Clark could remedy the whole problem. That was Mariana Rich from Garland. And they answer in parentheses, Superman is working on it. The trick is to get Lois interested in Clark, so when they marry, her switch of affections won't be noticeable, and cause people to suspect Clark is the man of might. Then someone else asks, what would happen to Lois's magazine if Lois married Superman? Would it cease to exist? Would it become Superman's wife, Lois Lane? Lois Kent? Lois Superman? That was a question from Robert Pina from New Jersey. Probably the first, they answer, since Lois would doubtless continue with the planet, writing under her maiden name. This under another section, there was a question that kind of tickled me. Does Lois Lane speak Kryptonese? She's been to the bottle city of Kandor several times. Has she learned the language during her visits? Asks Diane Van de Bogart, Ithaca, New York. Van de Bogart? I wonder if that's a real name. Anyway, they answer, no, she learned it before her first visit to Kandor from Superman. So Superman has sat down with Lois Lane and given her language lessons. That's a wonderful detail. Here we have the Superman family. I don't remember what I marked in here, but I will see. Well, I'm not sure what I want to read here, but here's part of it. Dear Super People, hey people, it's a new decade and it's time for real change. Please, please, please let Lois and Clark get married. All the arguments about their married lives not being interesting as their single lives just don't wash anymore. It's inevitable. So why not commit yourselves to it? That's from Stephen M. Richmond from Indiana. And they answer, quite frankly, Steve, having Superman and Lois marry, on Earth 1 that is about as likely as Charlie Brown growing up to go to college, Dick Tracy quitting the police force to write his memoirs, or Archie Andrews marrying Veronica Lodge. After 40 years, the Superman-Lois romance is too much a tradition to be changed into Superman or Clark-Lois marriage. Think about that, DC. Okay, I'm on 27 minutes already, but I'm just not going to stop. Some of you will make it to the end, but few, maybe. I think my average video gets 8 minutes of viewing according to the analytics. So probably I should try to just do 9-minute videos. Maybe then people would stick to the end. What did I think was worth reading on this page? Well, I'll save this for the. So this one is an extremely long, extremely critical letter that begins, Gad, issue 4, number 462 was pathetic. The Flash had yet another squad. Anyway, it goes on and analyzes everything in the issue. This is one of those giant size with multiple different stories going on. And that it must have been pages typewritten. And at the end she says, well, thank you for listening. If you print this, I guess you'll print anything. And it was from someone named Margaret O'Connell, Graduate College, Princeton, New Jersey. So I'm assuming someone in graduate school took their time to write a lengthy critique of an earlier issue of Adventure. Maybe I'll come back to that for the really hardcore people. Here's a Silver Age Legion of Superheroes with I think a Neil Adams cover, although in some ways it looks like Neil Adams, in some ways it doesn't. And here, dear editor, you once stated that Lightning Lad was the unluckiest Legionnaire of all. Oh, really? So what if he died? He was revived. He lost an arm, but he got a new one. What about the original Proddy, who died to revive Lightning Lad? Or Pharaoh Lad, who died to save the galaxy? Or Triplicate Girl, who lost one of her 3 bodies battling Computo and became Duo Damsel? I'd rather have Lightning Lad's misfortunes than any of these, says someone named Nelson from Massachusetts. And the editor adds, and how about Psycho Kid of the Legion Reserve? We have a doozy of a tale about his misfortunes in the works. I just really like that letter, I guess. There might have been other things on this page I wanted to read, but now I don't remember. Oh, here it is. Dear editor, I confess I haven't been keeping up with the Superboy magazine, but in Adventure number 369, you showed Superboy's parents as completely different people than they used to be. In all the other mags I have, Ma and Pa Kent are old people, but now all of a sudden they are young, in their late 30s. Please explain this change to a poorly informed reader like me. Ken Hartfield from Minnesota. This is the most astonishing confession we have ever heard. You haven't been keeping up with Superboy? Well, we are forgiving souls. We will let you off with a reprimand this time. But don't let it happen again. The change you missed occurred in Superboy number 145. A youth serum from another dimension turned the Kents younger. From the editor. A youth serum from another dimension. I knew nothing about this myself. I've got to get that issue. And I got to get that youth serum. Here's Turok, Son of Stone. I don't think it had a letters page. What did I mark in it? Even though... Oh. Because I learned that Gold Key had a comic book club. And you could join the club just by cutting out this card. And then once you were a card member, by cutting out that card, you could send them in knock-knock jokes. Then send in your jokes, riddles, knock-knocks, and drawings. Right now the drawings we want are those of animals, airplanes, and inventions. To those already members, is your old card worn out, mislaid, folded, spindled, or mutilated? Here's a fresh one to replace it. Don't delay. Sign today. So I guess I am lucky that this one was not cut out and not signed, despite this being like one of my most beat-up comic purchases ever. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. This is from Beyond the Unknown. I love this cover. I think I showed it in the last video, where the ape is at the store. And I think this is all reprints of older sort of science fiction and mystery stories from DC, stuff from the 59, 60. But there is a letters page now where, oh, I conveniently marked it, and I should look there. What did I want to read in here, though? Oh, here it is. This is from Bob Rozakis, who later, not too long later after this, I think, became a writer at DC. But I guess he got his start as a very active letter writer. Because he starts out, Dear Editor, having been writing letters for quite a while now, it does not surprise me to see my name pop up in a letter call every time I turn around. What does surprise me is to find out I've gotten a mention, not because of a letter I've written, but for one I didn't write. To remedy the lack of my letters to From Beyond the Unknown, here I am. And he goes on to review the issue, ending with, this issue's tale was par for the course. So I just thought that was funny. Like, I guess someone else in the letter column mentioned that he wasn't writing letters into that comic. And here's Captain Savage. And this was the second Marvel Age World War II. I think it was World War II, or maybe it takes place in a different, maybe it's Vietnam, I don't know. This was their other than the Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos comic, Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos comic, called Captain Savage and his Battlefield Raiders. And there's a letter in here. It has one of these great 2-page letter pages with reprints of panels. I always like when they do that. There's a letter in here from Sergeant Nick Fury. Dear Stan, Gary, and Dick, you gold-brickin', jaw-flappin', hair-brained, chicken-scratchin', flea-bitten, joy-riding jerks. What are you trying to do? Run me out of the business? What's the idea of getting rid of my newest competitors, Captain Savage's, beard and mustache? Next thing you know, you'll be trying to get rid of my cigars. By trying to make Savage more handsome and rugged-looking, I'll look like a third-class Irv Forbish. If you want to get these gun runners, maybe Savage had to do it. If you wanted to get these gun runners, maybe Savage had to do it. But since in your mags you can stretch time, the captain should at least have some fuzz on his puss by now. So get that beard growing. It's an order, mister. Sergeant Nick Fury. Honest, that's how it was signed. Right? They wrote that in parentheses. from Wayland, Ontario, Canada. I like that Sergeant McFury is in Ontario, Canada. And they answer back, or Captain Savage answers back, "Look, Fury, you keep out of my mag and I'll keep out of yours, okay? I don't need that kind of talk from a sergeant in the Army, even if he is the best sergeant that ever barked out an order. If you like beards so darn much, why don't you grow one? You look like you're doing just that half the time anyway." Captain Simon Savage. I thought that was great. Okay. For those of you who are still plugging along, we'll make this video even longer. I'm gonna read the whole letter from this graduate student at Princeton. Everyone else can go now. If you've even hung on so long, I really apologize. Actually, I thought that this would be at the most a 20-minute video, not twice that length. Dear people, Gad, issue number 462 was pathetic. The Flash had yet another squabble with his wife, saved her life, and then the ungrateful creature practically bit his head off for interfering. Sure, she didn't remember what happened, but the reader's reaction is still disgust. Then there was another dull dead man story, enlivened only by the beautiful Garcia Lopez art. Frankly, I never liked Dead Man in the first place, but these circus stereotypes of supporting characters are driving me bananas. To take only the most flagrant example, it seems never to have occurred to any of you people that the terms strong man and simple-minded but good-hearted are not necessarily synonymous. The Wonder Woman story was another disaster by Jack C. Harris, with simplistic and simple-minded characters, some of whom go so far as to switch back and forth from utterly good to totally evil at the drop of a magic ruby. Also, the whole sequence on page 49 makes no sense. There seem to be panels missing. How anyone could write such great stories from Supergirl and Superman family could produce nothing but junk for Wonder Woman is difficult to understand. Why, oh why, did Harris ever switch assignments? In the Aquaman story, Paul Cooperberg, by the way, I've seen Paul Cooperberg letters in a lot of comics too. So he must have been quite a letter hack before he started writing for DC. Paul Cooperberg could not content with continuing his relentless misrepresentation of Aquaman as a violence-prone vigilante, contrary to the Sea King's entire past history, has now bent King Vulko's character completely out of shape too. Sorry, but if Vulko were given to stonewalling and self-deception for the sake of political expedience, I'm sure Aquaman and the people of Atlantis would never have accepted him as the new ruler. After all, they can't all be utter fools. Interesting, I guess Aquaman gets deposed from the throne of Atlantis quite frequently, as he is currently. But the Justice Society story was the worst. I don't know how it could get worse than that at this point. All-Star was one of my favorite comics, and I usually like Paul Levitz's writing, but the death of Batman was nothing but a waste in every sense of the word. Personally, I would have found it more interesting if the Earth 2 Bruce Wayne had remained alive and become more fully integrated into the JSA's adventures, occasionally appearing even when there was not a dire emergency. However, his death could have provided the opportunity for a moving story that would somehow sum up the many contradictory qualities of this man, who in many ways was so different from his Earth 1 counterpart. Instead, Wayne's death, and especially his last-minute switch into costume, apparently added for no other reason than to make sure the most dull-witted reader realized that this was actually a superhero dying, wasn't even dramatically necessary. The villain, whom even Power Girl's Kryptonian might couldn't overcome, seemed created for the express purpose of making history by killing DC's second biggest hero. Neither the source of his powers nor the truth about his grudge against Wayne were explained satisfactorily, and it's beginning to look as if they never will be. The utter implausibility of the whole situation left the impression that Batman's death was not only pointless, there must have been some other way to overcome that guy, but accomplished nothing but ridding the world of one maniac, who apparently is merely the tip of the iceberg of some bigger plot. Said plot, alas, will probably prove to be just as anticlimactic as the historic death was. Furthermore, doesn't Batman's determination to go out with his boots and cape on blow his secret identity and, by that simple reasoning process, even the stupidest crook can easily perform those of Robin and the Huntress? Maybe Wayne wanted everyone to know he was Batman after he was dead, but it sure makes things tough for his daughter and son, in quotes. And that little scene in the graveyard where Dick responded to his sister's insistence that he not don his old mentor's cowl and costume with a bewildered, "I don't understand, Helena. You mean you want to be the Batman?" came across as pure farce. If Grayson were really that dumb, he wouldn't have survived a single season as Batman's little helper. And Staten, the artist Joe Staten, and Staten overdid the broad grin on the ghastly Batman face, looming over Dick and Helena when they finally justified the story's title by agreeing that, quote, "only legends live forever, and not the men who make them." A dignified smile of approval would have been in order, but not a Jimmy Carter campaign smirk. Well, thank you for listening. If you print this letter, I guess you'll print anything. Margaret O'Connell, Graduate College, Box 208, Princeton, New Jersey, 08540. And the editor's answer, "No, hardly anything, but yours was perhaps the best reasoned negative letter on the death of Batman, and while we feel you simply missed a number of the points and emotional overtones we successfully conveyed to most of the readers in that story." So it's amazing, really, the effort that went into some of these letters pages. And it also amazes me, and I guess I used to feel that way with T.M. Maple because so many of his letters were pretty rough reviews, is there were people reading comics and being disappointed with them, and reading more comics and being disappointed with them. On some level, I think they're still enjoying them, but they can't resist tearing them apart and constantly being disappointed. Maybe always having an ideal comic book in their mind and just not always getting it. But these are an era of comics where I personally did not feel that engaged with DC, but obviously some people really did. I probably would have liked to have written letters like that into Marvel, but I don't think I ever actually sent a letter in. I'm not sure. Boy, the brain. Okay, if you really watched all the way through, I can't tell you how grateful I am to you or how amazed I am. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.